The smell of cinnamon and butter filled my kitchen as I pulled my apple pie from the oven. It was the same recipe I had used for more than 40 years, one that had carried me through birthdays, Sunday dinners, and every Thanksgiving since Arthur and I first married. I hummed an old tune, tapping my oven mitt against the counter in rhythm, when my phone chimed from the table. I expected a reminder or a note from a friend. Instead, I saw a voicemail from my son. With a smile, I pressed play. His voice filled the kitchen, deep and familiar, but the words struck like a blade. "I can't stand this useless old woman anymore. Once she's gone, Michelle and I will celebrate in Europe with her money." My breath caught. The phone trembled in my hand. For a moment I thought perhaps I had misheard, that my Liam had not just spoken about my death as if it were an overdue appointment. But there it was, his voice, careless and cruel, spilling through the speaker. The pie's sweet aroma suddenly made me nauseous. I set the dish down harder than I meant to, the pan clattering against the stovetop. My heart thudded, each beat sharper than the last. The voicemail ended with a laugh, then silence. No apology, no correction, no sorry, wrong words, only a son revealing his true thoughts. I replayed it, as if punishing myself to be sure. The message was short, no more than a few sentences, but it was enough to break something inside me. Liam had meant to send it to Michelle, his wife, but instead it had landed in the lap of his mother. I stood frozen, phone clutched like a poisonous snake. For 3 years since Arthur's death, I had tried to believe that family remained a safe harbor. Liam visited occasionally, asking if I needed groceries or help with the yard. His wife, Michelle, smiled politely while eyeing my furniture, tracing fingers along the polished wood as if calculating its value. And Virginia, my daughter, came by with casseroles and questions about my future plans. Subtle hints, gentle prods, but nothing that prepared me for this. Now, in less than 1 minute, the illusions were gone. I walked to the window, staring out at the garden Arthur had loved. The roses we planted together stretched in neat rows, a ritual he repeated every spring. Their petals glowed in the late afternoon sun, stubbornly alive, unlike the trust I had once held for my children. "Well, Arthur," I whispered, pressing my palm to the glass, "looks like the day you warned me about has come." I could still hear him, lying in that hospital bed during his final months. His voice had been thin, yet steady. "Jacqueline, people change when money is involved, even family. Promise me you'll protect yourself." At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious, a man staring down the end of life and seeing shadows everywhere. But I promised, and Arthur, being Arthur, had made sure I would have tools if the shadows became real. With hands steadier than I expected, I scrolled to a number saved under a single initial, H. I had not dialed it in years. My finger hovered, then pressed. "Jacqueline?" came the voice on the second ring. Warm, professional, and instantly familiar. "Harold," I said, forcing calm into my tone. "Do you remember that conversation Arthur had with you about the provisions?" There was a pause, heavy enough to make my pulse race. "Yes, I remember. Are you saying it's time?" "It's time." Silence again, then a sigh. "I'll make the calls. Everything will be in motion by morning." After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen, staring at the pie cooling on the counter. Tomorrow Liam would arrive, expecting me to serve him dessert with a smile, perhaps followed by another small loan to help with his mortgage. He would not expect that I had heard his words, that I had already taken steps. My phone buzzed again. A text from Michelle. "Looking forward to tomorrow. Liam can't wait for your pie." I smiled for the first time since hearing the voicemail, though it was not a smile of affection. It was the smile of a woman who had stopped being blind. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered into the quiet kitchen, "neither of you has any idea what's coming. Grief is a fog that lays a soft hand over sharp edges." After Arthur died, I spent months moving through rooms like a woman underwater, hearing my own voice from far away. In that gentler haze, concern and calculation can look almost the same. A child's visit is a kindness until you notice the eyes, not on your face but on the frames and the china and the doors that open to closets you forgot to lock. Liam came first, as he often did on Saturday mornings. He brought a paper cup of coffee and that brisk, let's fix things energy that had made him a decent salesman in his better years. He walked me through the house as if he were previewing a listing, windows, floors, roof, resale. He did not say the word resale, but it hung between us like a real estate sign waiting for a wind to flip it open. "Mom," he said, pausing at the top of the stairs, "this place is too much for one person. What if you tripped? You need a simpler life." He touched the banister, not with affection, but with appraisal. Michelle stood behind him, fingers skimming the carved wood as though she were reading Braille for price. I laughed then, a polite, motherly laugh. I told him I liked my home. I told him I had lived with its creaks and quirks long enough to know which boards complain and which stairs demand respect. He nodded, listening, the way people in sales are trained to nod. When he hugged me goodbye, his cheek was cool. I breathed in a scent that was not his cologne but something else entirely: anticipation. A week later, Virginia arrived with a casserole that tasted like the memory of church basements, earnest, bland, heavy with a certain kind of virtue. She laid glossy brochures on my kitchen table while the oven reheated. Themes repeated across the pages: smiling seniors with watercolor sets, tidy haircuts, manicured paths curving around small lakes that probably had names like Serenity or Reflection. The numbers at the bottom were impressive in the way of numbers that are meant to scare people into action. "These communities handle everything," she said brightly. "Transportation, housekeeping, medication reminders, social calendars. You would never have to worry again." "I do not worry now," I said. "But you could," she replied, which was not the same thing at all. Patrick came with her that day. He stood at my back door with his hands in his pockets, a stance that men adopt when they want to look easygoing while measuring the distance to a useful exit. His smile was thin, careful, the kind a man learns at work when he needs to soothe or steer. He asked about the market, not the stock market exactly, but my market, insurance, investments, whether I had an advisor or preferred to self-direct. He did not ask about books I had read or the last film I enjoyed. He did not ask about roses. I remember the evening he leaned in as Virginia chatted and said, almost gently, "Security matters, Jacqueline, for everyone." Everyone was a large word that somehow did not include me. Between those visits, small things multiplied. Michelle texted links to articles about aging safely at home, and each one came with a subtitle about the hidden costs of independence. Liam called to ask if I needed help with yard work, and then mentioned a contractor who could freshen the place for when the time comes. The time for what was left tastefully undefined. Virginia, ever the diplomat, suggested I speak to a friend who helped women like you optimize their assets so they did not outlive their money. Women like me. I wondered what that phrase meant in the dark. Widowed, soft, persuadable. The truth is, there were moments I almost believed them. Loneliness is a salesman with perfect timing. It knocks right after supper, when the house turns quiet and the chair across from you is only a chair. It shows you the soft lights and cheerful clubs of a curated life and says, you could be safe here, and you would not need to be brave anymore. Then the fog lifted, inch by inch, and I began to notice the script. The same adjectives, the same pauses before the words big house, the synchronized sigh over medications I do not take. Concern that circles back to a single destination, liquid assets. I heard Arthur's voice in the space between their sentences. People change when money is involved. Even family. The day I found the folder labeled important in my desk, my will, the deed, the policies Arthur had been so meticulous about, I understood what he had left me was not simply paperwork. It was a spine. It was a map written in his careful hand, a way out of fog if the weather turned. Harold's number was there too, tucked behind a note Arthur had once pressed into my palm after a difficult appointment. If you ever feel unsure, call H. No explanations needed. I had kept that note between 2 pages of an old cookbook, a place where no one would look because no one asks for recipes anymore, they ask for delivery apps. I did not call that day. Pride is a stubborn companion. Instead, I tested the people who claimed to be my guardians. I mentioned a small trip I might take, a cooking class I had always wanted. Virginia gently reminded me to be prudent with airfare and tuition. Patrick offered to review any contracts I might sign. Liam suggested I postpone until spring, a season that was always a little later than my life. One evening, while the sun folded itself behind the fence and turned the kitchen to gold, I stood at the sink and let warm water run over my wrists. I thought about the first time Arthur and I had walked into this house with a borrowed dining table and a mattress tied with twine to the roof of a car that should not have been entrusted with either. We were young, we were foolish, we were gloriously uninsurable, and no one looked at us like inventory. The next morning, I went to the garden and spent an hour among the roses. I deadheaded what needed letting go and tied new growth to steady supports. When I finished, I wiped the clippings from my gloves and laughed aloud, startling a bird from the hedge. It occurred to me that the difference between pruning and theft is intention. One helps a living thing become itself. The other empties that life to fill another. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket. Another message from Michelle, all sweetness and exclamation points. "Can't wait to see you this weekend. We'll bring the new brochures, so exciting." I turned the phone face down on the bench. The bench did not mind being used that way. It did not need to be told it was still useful. That was the last quiet hour before the voicemail arrived. After that, there would be no more brochures, only documents. No more soft pressure, only evidence. The fog burned off in an instant, and underneath it, the road Arthur had drawn waited, clear and straight, leading me toward Harold's door. Harold Green's office was quiet, the kind of quiet built from decades of secrets spoken and sealed behind oak doors. I had not been there in years, not since Arthur's final months when we arranged paperwork I never thought I would need. The air smelled faintly of old leather and lemon polish. It was the smell of permanence, the scent of a man who knew how to put chaos into orderly stacks of paper. He rose when I entered, tall and slightly stooped, his gray hair combed neatly, his tie knotted with the same precision he applied to his sentences. "Jacqueline," he said, his voice warm but measured. "Arthur was right. You would know when it was time." I sank into the chair opposite his desk, smoothing the hem of my skirt with hands that wanted to tremble. "It is time," I replied. I heard Liam's voice. I cannot unhear it. Harold nodded as if he had been waiting for those words. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick folder with my name written in his hand across the tab. Harris, Special Provisions. "Arthur was always a man who prepared," Harold began, resting his palm on the file. "When he came to me 3 years ago, he said, 'Harold, I want protections in place. Not just the ordinary will, not just the life insurance. I want contingencies if grief turns to greed.' I thought he was being cautious, maybe even a little grim, but I drafted what he asked for." He slid the folder across the desk to me. Inside were documents I recognized, copies of our will, the deed to the house, the insurance policy we took out together long ago. But beneath those, neatly clipped, were pages I had never seen. "What is all this?" I asked. "Evidence," Harold said simply. "Arthur insisted I retain a private investigator. He wanted a clear picture of your children's financial circumstances in case they ever acted against you." My chest tightened. "He had them investigated?" Harold's eyes softened. "He loved them, Jacqueline. But he was not blind. He saw the way Liam spent money before he earned it. He worried about Virginia's appetite for appearances. He wanted facts, not suspicions." With careful fingers, I pulled the first set of papers from the folder. Bank statements, credit card balances, mortgage documents. The numbers blurred for a moment, then sharpened into something undeniable. "Liam and Michelle," Harold explained. "They owe more than $400,000 in combined debt. They have refinanced their home twice, taken personal loans, and drained what should have been his retirement account. They are not sinking, Jacqueline. They are drowning." I set the papers down, pressing my hand against them as if I could keep the debt from seeping into my skin. Harold handed me the next packet. "Virginia and Patrick. Their situation is less public, but just as precarious. $300,000 in debt, most of it from the last 5 years. Private schools, luxury cars, that renovation they boasted about, all financed on credit. Without your inheritance, they cannot sustain it." The room tilted slightly. I gripped the arms of the chair. My children had spoken about my security, my comfort, my future, but every word was a mirror, reflecting not me but themselves. Arthur's voice echoed in memory. "People change when money is involved, even family." I closed the folder slowly. "They are not concerned about me. They are concerned about surviving their own choices." Harold's gaze was steady. "That is the truth of it. And Arthur anticipated more than just money troubles." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "He asked me to create a mechanism that would activate if your children attempted manipulation or coercion. The trust, the will, the charitable clauses they are designed to protect you, Jacqueline. If they push, they lose everything." I felt the corners of my mouth lift into something that was not a smile, and they have already begun to push. Yes. Harold's voice was low. But before you decide your next step, there is more you should see. Evidence beyond debt. Evidence that may be harder to bear. He opened a smaller envelope, sealed in red wax. Inside lay a transcript, typewritten, with the neat notation of a professional observer. He hesitated before sliding it toward me. Eric Donovan, the investigator Arthur retained, has been monitoring conversations, phone calls, meetings, nothing illegal public information, overheard words, social media posts, but enough to reveal intention. My throat tightened. Intention? Harold's eyes met mine, grave and unwavering. Yes, intention. I need you to prepare yourself, Jacqueline, because the numbers are harsh, but what they've been planning, that is harsher still. The office clock ticked in the silence that followed, steady and merciless. I laid my hand on the envelope, knowing that once I opened it, there would be no going back. Tell me, I said finally, my voice firmer than I expected. What did they intend? The transcript lay heavy in my lap as though each page had been dipped in lead. I forced myself to read the neat lines, the investigator's words as cold as courtroom stenography. Observation. Subject Liam Harris visited local insurance office, applied for life insurance policy listing Jacqueline Harris as insured, himself as beneficiary. Policy value, $4 million. Clause, double payout in event of accidental death. The words blurred, then sharpened again. $4 million. $8 million if I slipped on a staircase or had a car accident. My own son had signed his name to paperwork that made my death worth more than my life. I closed my eyes and let the paper fall against the desk. Arthur, I whispered, you were right. You were more than right. Harold Green leaned forward, his elbows resting on the oak surface between us. There is more, he said gently, as though soft tones could cushion the blow. Liam called your doctor's office 2 weeks ago. He pretended concern, asked questions about your medications, your mental sharpness. Eric recorded the details from the nurse who took the call. It was framed as love, but the subtext was clear. He was laying groundwork to challenge your competency. I stared at Harold, disbelief simmering into anger. Competency, I repeated, as if I am a doddering fool who cannot read a bank statement. I balanced Arthur's accounts for nearly 40 years while he treated patients. I managed every mortgage, every tuition bill, every insurance premium. And now my own son wants a signature declaring me unfit? Harold did not answer. He only let me rage, because rage was steadier than despair. The folder still had more, and I could not pretend otherwise. I pulled the next document free, a summary of conversations. Virginia had been heard telling a neighbor that I was forgetful, that perhaps I was not safe alone in such a big house. Patrick had spoken to an acquaintance about legal avenues for ensuring an aging parent's assets were responsibly directed. Their strategy was different from Liam's, but the destination was the same. Remove my control, access my money, erase me while my body still drew breath. My hands curled into fists against the papers. They are circling me like vultures, I said. One prepares the ground with gossip, the other lays a noose of insurance, and all of them think I will step into the trap willingly. Harold's expression was grave. This is why Arthur planned as he did. He did not want you unprotected if grief turned to greed. I sat straighter in the chair. Then tell me, Harold, what protections are in place? He opened a locked drawer and withdrew another envelope, this one stamped confidential provisions. He laid it between us. Arthur insisted on a clause. If either child attempts manipulation, coercion, or fraud, every asset within his estate and yours will bypass them completely. The funds, what they know about and what they do not, would be transferred to charitable trusts. I lifted the flap, revealing documents filled with legal phrasing and notary seals. The numbers at the bottom made my breath catch. Accounts I had never known about. Investments Arthur had quietly nurtured, now totaling more than $6,500,000. Money my children never dreamed existed. Harold continued. Arthur wanted secrecy until the day you needed it. He told me, Jacqueline is kind, but kindness can be exploited. I want her to have teeth hidden behind the smile. I laughed then, a sharp, humorless sound. Teeth. He gave me fangs. Yes, Harold agreed, but only to defend yourself. I closed the folder with careful hands. And now, Harold, it seems defense is no longer a distant theory, it is a necessity. The clock on the wall ticked, solemn as a heartbeat. Outside, the world went about its business, cars in motion, people buying groceries, children chasing each other down sidewalks, while in this room the foundation of my family cracked. I rose, smoothing my jacket, the weight of years pressing but not breaking me. Arthur trusted you to protect me, Harold. And I trust you still. It is time to show them that their mother is not an easy mark. Harold inclined his head. What do you intend? I intend, I said, my voice steady as steel, to let them reveal themselves fully, and then I will show them exactly what Arthur prepared. As I left the office, the folder clutched under my arm, I felt something ignite inside me, not fear, not grief, but a clear flame of resolve. For years I had been mother, teacher, wife, widow. Now I would become something else, the keeper of my own fate. When I stepped into the fading afternoon light, I did not feel small. I felt dangerous. The next morning dawned bright, almost too bright, as though the sun had not been informed that treachery lived inside my walls. I brewed coffee, set the pie Liam loved on the counter, and waited. At 9 sharp, the doorbell chimed. I opened the door to find Liam and Michelle standing on the porch, all polished smiles and cheap grocery store flowers. "Mom," Liam said warmly, hugging me with arms that felt rehearsed. "You look wonderful." Michelle extended the bouquet. "Daisies, your favorite." They were not. I had been allergic for 20 years. I accepted them anyway, because some battles are not worth fighting when larger wars loom. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. They settled into the living room, their eyes flicking from china cabinet to grandfather clock, cataloging what they might one day call theirs. I poured coffee and set the cups carefully on the table. My hands did not shake. "So," I asked, "what brings you today?" Liam exchanged a glance with Michelle. "We've been thinking about your situation here. Big house, lots of responsibility. It must be hard." I sipped my coffee, let the silence stretch. "What responsibilities exactly?" Michelle leaned forward, her smile a shade too wide. "Housekeeping, bills, the garden, managing everything alone. Wouldn't it be nice to have help?" I set down my cup. "Help or control?" Their smiles faltered, but only for a moment. Liam cleared his throat. "Mom, it's just concern. We want you safe." Without a word, I pulled my phone from my pocket and pressed play. His voice filled the room. "I can't stand this useless old woman anymore. Once she's gone, Michelle and I will celebrate in Europe with her money." The color drained from Liam's face. Michelle's hand flew to her mouth. "Mom, I can explain," Liam stammered. Michelle snapped. "You weren't supposed to say it like that." Silence followed, thick and heavy. I let them sit in it. Finally, I spoke. "You think I am blind, but I see you. I see the brochures, the questions, the way you look at this house. You want me gone." "Mom, no," Liam began. "Yes," I cut in. "You want me gone. But let me be clear, I am not going anywhere." They left in a flurry of excuses, but their eyes carried the truth. 3 days later, Virginia and Patrick arrived. She carried another casserole, he a stack of shiny pamphlets. Their smiles were smoother, their performance more polished. "Mom," Virginia said sweetly, "we've been talking. Maybe instead of worrying about conserving money, you should spend it. Take trips, enroll in classes, live a little." Patrick nodded. "Why hold back? Enjoy yourself now. That way you don't have to think about what happens later." It was a clever strategy, encourage me to spend freely so nothing would remain for charity. A different trap, but still a trap. I folded my arms. "How thoughtful of you. Tell me, Virginia, is this concern for my happiness or concern that the money might slip through your fingers?" Her cheeks flushed, but she recovered quickly. "Mom, we only want you fulfilled. Isn't that what Dad would have wanted?" "Your father wanted me safe from greed," I said, rising from my chair, "and he gave me the tools to make sure of it." Patrick's eyes narrowed, the mask slipping. "Money brings security, for everyone." I met his gaze without flinching. "Security for you, perhaps. But for me, security means knowing I cannot be manipulated, and I assure you, Patrick, I cannot." They left soon after, their smiles brittle as glass. The casserole cooled untouched on the counter. That night, alone in the quiet, I sat in Arthur's old recliner. The weight of betrayal pressed against me, but beneath it pulsed something harder, sharper resolve. My children thought I was fragile. They believed age had softened me, left me too weak to fight. They could not see what Arthur had built into me, what time had carved into bone and will. I picked up the phone and dialed Harold's number again. When he answered, I said only, "It's time to gather them. All of them. No more whispers in kitchens or pamphlets on my table. If they want to discuss my future, they will do it in front of me, in your office, with every truth laid bare." There was a pause, then Harold replied, "Very well. I will arrange it." I leaned back, closing my eyes. Tomorrow would not be easy. But tomorrow, the games would end. Harold Green's conference room smelled of polish and paper, a place where lives were reordered with ink and signatures. The mahogany table stretched long between us, its surface gleaming under the weight of 3 thick folders. I sat at the head, my back straight, Arthur's wedding ring still snug on my hand. The door opened. Liam and Michelle entered first, their smiles thin, already strained. Virginia and Patrick followed, polished and cool, their eyes scanning the room like investors evaluating a deal. "Mom," Virginia said, taking a seat with a bright smile, "what's all this?" "It is about truth," I replied. "Truth and what happens when lies grow too heavy." Harold cleared his throat. "Before we begin, understand this. You are here because Jacqueline deserves honesty. She deserves respect, and today she will have both." He opened the first folder and slid several documents across the table. "Liam, would you care to explain this?" Liam frowned, then paled as he read. The insurance application, his name as beneficiary. $4 million in coverage, doubled for accidental death. Michelle gasped, clutching his arm. "Liam, you didn't." "I can explain," Liam said quickly. "It was just protection, for funeral costs, for estate taxes." I cut in. "Estate taxes on what estate, Liam? According to you, I was on the brink of outliving my money. Why take out a policy worth $8 million if you were so concerned about my longevity?" His jaw worked silently. Virginia leaned forward, voice smooth. "Mom, you must have misunderstood." Liam was stressed. "We've all been stressed. He meant no harm." Harold tapped the table. "Mrs. Harris has the voicemail, Virginia. I've heard it myself." The room chilled. Liam looked at his hands. Michelle looked at me with something that might have been shame or simply fear. Harold opened the second folder. "Patrick, Virginia, your debts total more than $300,000. Private schools, luxury cars, renovations far beyond your means. And yet you've been pressing your mother about assisted living. Glossy brochures don't erase motive." Patrick's eyes narrowed, a predator sensing exposure. "Debt is normal. Everyone lives on credit." "Not everyone lies about it," I said sharply. The silence that followed was taut as wire. Harold broke it by sliding the third folder into the center. Arthur anticipated this. He created provisions to protect Jacqueline. If either child attempts manipulation, coercion, or fraud, every known asset transfers immediately to charity. Virginia stiffened. "That can't be legal." "Oh, it is," Harold said calmly. "Arthur insured it, and Jacqueline has already executed the documents. They are binding." Michelle's voice cracked. "So, what does that mean for us?" "It means," I said, folding my hands, "that the more you press, the less you receive. The moment you attempt to force my hand, your inheritance dissolves. Every dollar goes to strangers instead of you." Liam's face flushed crimson. "You can't do this. We're your children." I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. "And yet here you are, planning my future as if I were already gone, signing your name to papers that profit from my death, whispering doubts about my mind, my memory. Tell me, Liam, what part of that sounds like love?" He had no answer. Patrick's voice cut through the silence. Low, controlled. "You think paperwork will save you? You think a signature can protect you from desperation?" The threat was not hidden. It hung heavy, darkening the air. I straightened, my voice steady. "Arthur once told me people reveal themselves when money is at stake. Today, you've revealed enough. And I am finished pretending not to see it." Harold gathered the folders, closing them with finality. "This meeting is over." Virginia's smile cracked at last. "Mom, wait, we can work this out. We're family." "Family doesn't plot accidents," I said coldly. "Family doesn't measure a mother's worth in dollars." I rose, my chair scraping against the polished floor. My pulse was steady, my steps firm. I had come into this room with doubt, but I left with certainty. The lines were drawn now, permanent and unmovable. Behind me, Patrick muttered, "This isn't finished." No, I thought. It was only beginning. The house was still when I returned from Harold's office, yet silence no longer brought peace. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the old pipes felt like a warning. I double-locked the door, drew the curtains, and set Arthur's old revolver on the mantel where I could see it. I had not fired it in years, but tonight I needed its presence. 3 days passed without a word from Liam or Virginia. On the 4th, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Mom, we just want to talk. Please let us in." No names, but I knew who it was. I typed a single reply. "Not tonight." That evening, as the sun slipped beneath the trees, headlights washed across my front lawn. I peeked through the curtain. A dark sedan idled in the driveway. 2 shapes sat inside, unmoving. I watched until the engine finally rumbled away. The next morning, Harold called. "Jacqueline, the investigator has more." His voice carried weight, the kind that presses on your chest. "Patrick has been overheard discussing alternative solutions. He mentioned that accidents happen to women who live alone." The words stole my breath. "He said that?" "Yes," Harold confirmed. "Jacqueline, I want you to consider leaving the house for a while. Stay with a trusted friend. Or I can arrange protection." "No," I said firmly. "This is my home. I will not be driven from it." That night I invited Helen, my neighbor, for tea. She had always been loyal, tending her roses beside mine, sharing casseroles during Arthur's illness. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, her kind eyes sharp with resolve. "You're not alone," she said, squeezing my hand. "If they come, I'll be watching. They'll have to walk through me first." Her words steadied me. For the first time in days, I slept. But safety was an illusion. The following evening, as I watered the garden, I caught sight of movement beyond the fence. A figure lingered near the hedge, too tall to be Helen. My pulse raced. "Who's there?" I demanded. No answer. Only the crunch of footsteps retreating into darkness. I went inside, locked the doors, and dialed Harold. "They're circling," I told him. "Then it's time," he replied. "The documents are filed, the evidence secured. Jacqueline, we should involve the police." "Not yet," I whispered, staring at the empty yard. "First, I want them to hear it from me. They need to know Arthur's plan has teeth, and that their games are over." The next morning, I received another message, this time from Virginia. "Mom, we've made mistakes, but can't we fix this? Please, let's talk face to face." Her tone was softer, practiced, but my resolve did not waver. I wrote back, "If you want to talk, meet me tomorrow at Harold's office, not before." By evening, the phone rang again. Daniel Rivers, the investigator, his voice urgent. "Mrs. Harris, I've intercepted messages between Liam and Patrick. They're planning something during your upcoming errands. Please be cautious." I looked at Arthur's revolver on the mantel, its metal glinting under the lamplight. "Tell them," I said quietly, "that their mother isn't afraid. And tell Harold I'll be ready." When I hung up, I walked to the garden where Arthur's roses bloomed, the petals deep red against the fading light. I whispered to the earth, "You were right, my love. They have shown their colors, but I will not be their victim." The night air was cool, the sky thick with stars. Somewhere beyond the hedge I sensed eyes watching. Let them watch, I thought. Tomorrow, their illusions would shatter. Harold's conference room was colder the second time. The blinds were drawn, the table bare except for 2 thick binders and a small digital recorder. I sat at the head once more, my back straight, Arthur's wedding ring heavy on my hand like a shield. The door opened. Liam walked in first, his shoulders tight, Michelle trailing behind him. Virginia followed with Patrick, both wearing faces carved from stone. They looked like a jury, but I knew better they were defendants. "Mom," Virginia began, her voice silk over steel. "Thank you for agreeing to meet again. We want peace." I raised a brow. "Peace? Or leverage?" Harold spoke before they could answer. "Let's begin. Everything said here is being recorded." He pressed a button, and the red light glowed. I leaned forward. "You've whispered doubts about my mind. You've dangled brochures for places I never asked to see. You've signed insurance forms that make my death worth $8 million. Tell me, which of you calls that love?" Liam's jaw clenched. "It's not like that," Patrick muttered. "You don't understand what we're facing." "No," I said, my voice sharp as glass. "I understand perfectly. Debt, desperation, and greed dressed as concern. What you don't understand is Arthur prepared for this. Every account, every deed, every dollar is protected. The more you push, the less you inherit. Press me again, and everything goes to charity." Silence dropped, heavy and absolute. Virginia tried first. "Mom, we were scared. We made mistakes, but we can fix this." "Fix this?" I cut in. "You cannot unsign a policy. You cannot unwhisper lies about my memory. You cannot undo the nights I sat alone, wondering if my own children were planning my end." Harold slid one binder across the table. "These are the updated trust documents fully executed. Jacqueline's estate bypasses her heirs if there is evidence of coercion, fraud, or threat. That condition has already been met." Michelle's voice cracked. "So, we get nothing?" I looked at her steadily. "You get what you earned." Liam slammed his fist on the table. "You can't cut us out. We're your family." I rose slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. Family does not measure a mother's worth in dollars. Family does not wait for her to die. You were my children, but today you are strangers. Patrick leaned back, his smile thin and cruel. "You think paperwork saves you? We still know where you live." Harold's voice cut through like a gavel. "Mr. Donovan, threats in this room are evidence. This recorder will go directly to law enforcement if needed." For the first time, fear flickered in Patrick's eyes. I gathered the binders, my hands steady. "This meeting is over. Do not call me. Do not come to my house. From this moment, you have no claim on me or what I leave behind." Virginia's voice cracked. "Mom, please. We can change." I paused at the door. "Then prove it. Live 5 years without speaking of money, inheritance, or what you think you deserve. If you can do that, maybe we'll talk again. Until then, my life is mine." I walked out, leaving them in silence. Outside, the air was crisp, the sky wide and blue. For the first time since Arthur's death, I felt light, unshackled. The weight of their schemes no longer pressed on me. I was free. 2 months later, I stood in an airport terminal, ticket in hand. Ireland first, then Scotland. Arthur and I had dreamed of those green hills, and now I would see them with my own eyes. Helen had promised to watch the house. Harold had promised to handle any fallout. And I had promised myself never again to live as though waiting for betrayal. As the boarding call echoed, I smiled. My children had tried to turn me into a ledger, but I had chosen something richer, my own freedom. I whispered to Arthur's memory. "You were right, my love. People change when money is involved. But I changed too. I became stronger than they ever expected. And with that, I stepped onto the plane, not a victim, not a prize, but a woman unbroken, carrying her life forward into the wide and waiting world."